Bears, blog, boys, you know it all, computer, analytic, geeky nerds. Michael Schneider, Tom Cavanaugh, the Bear, blog, boys, know-it-alls, doing some podcast somewhere. Nobody wants to hear you. Geeks, you pencil-pushing, skinny jean wearing geeks, you.
Coming to you live from our mom's basement. This is the Bears Blog Boys podcast. I'm your co-host, Tom Cavanaugh, here with my good buddy and other co-host, Michael Snyder. Snyder, so much has changed in the short amount of time since we last recorded. There is a lot to talk about, but obviously we're going to be here for our first preview of the season against the Vikings. My friend, how are you doing?
Fired up, Tom. Football is in the air. Smell it. I'm ready to go. Ball starts today. Bears football is in arm's reach, Tom, and I am very fired up to have our first in-season breakdown. I think this is, just the heart of, the time for us, obviously, but I think we're going to come, just fired up with a lot more content, a lot more deeper dives, and I just, again, couldn't be more fired up.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a preview, this is going to be one of the more extensive ones because I just feel like there's so much to talk about with this matchup. I mean, the offensive play caller for the Bears versus the Vikings defensive play caller in itself is going to be one of the biggest chess matches of the year. All right, and it's going to happen twice a year. But to open the season that way, I think it's going to be just such a fascinating matchup as it's been for the last however long these two coordinators have been calling plays for their respective teams. So, yeah, I'm very fired up to talk about that. But Snyder, there's a couple news hitting notes that we have to go over. Unfortunately, the first one that we did not talk about from when we last recorded, that was Micah Parsons being traded to the Green Bay Packers, the Bears' division rival and obviously the biggest rival in Bears history. Man, Snyder, we talked about the Micah Parsons trade hypothetically happening, but we both kind of agreed that we didn't think he was going to get traded. It's a huge gut punch that it was the Packers that were able to close that one.
Yeah, that one hurt, and it was frustrating. Did not think that Micah Parsons would get traded, right? It just seems like the Cowboys had so much leverage just to keep him, but they end up getting him for 2 first-round picks and Kenny Clark, right? Kenny Clark, aging asset, it's kind of irrelevant there, but 2 first-round picks that seem late time, it almost feels like the Packers kind of stole him away, right? Here, I mean, Tom, Micah Parsons, I can't stress this enough, in my opinion, is like that Von Miller Super Bowl MVP type, Aaron Donald, I think he won a Super Bowl MVP. He is that level of a game wrecker, right? He is a player that you have to game plan around. He just disrupts and wrecks offenses. And he could just take over games with his pass rush ability. I think he is the best football player in the NFL outside of quarterback. I think that makes this division just that much more competitive, right? Like you have Aiden Hutchinson. Like, last year you look at Matt Eberflus, he was an obvious weak link in a division that featured Dan Campbell, LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell. And then now you add, you have Aiden Hutchinson in there. Now you add Micah Parsons. It's just, Tom, this division couldn't keep getting more and more competitive. So, that's why it also hurts that they got Micah Parsons because, Tom, this division is a toss-up. It can go so many different ways. And now that, given the Bears' offensive tackle situation, now they got to go against Hutchinson twice a year. Parsons twice a year. Tom, it's just that much harder.
Yeah, I think it's truly like a game-changing. It's a division-changing move. I think it makes the Packers the favorite in the division, unfortunately. And it's not like they didn't have a chance to win it before. Like you said, it was definitely a crapshoot on who was going to come out on top of this division because of how competitive it is. But that was really their missing piece, in my opinion. They did not have. They had some good secondary players and some intriguing young players that could eventually maybe turn into those guys on the back end. But they really were missing that force up front, and they just got arguably the best one in the NFL. Like you said, Snyder, I think it was a steal too. I think for where both teams were at, it was just questionable why the Cowboys are supposed to be competing, right? I didn't understand their angle. It really seemed like it was a money thing. They didn't want to be tied down, even though like you pay, like I'm willing to pay those prices for players when they are the caliber of Micah Parsons. I feel like those are the players you pay, but they saw it differently. And it just comes back to like, I wonder like who else was in on this trade, because I feel like if I was the Cowboys, the Packers would be, maybe not the most desirable team in terms of getting their first round picks, especially if I'm sending Micah Parsons there. And you got to wonder, Snyder, where were the Bears in these conversations? Because I know that the Bears are not like strapped by any means with cap, but they're pretty invested in terms of money with the defensive line. And the thing that's kind of going missing in this Micah Parsons discussion is he did get paid a ton of money, right? I think it was like $47.5 million a year, which is a lot, right? And there's no doubt about it. But that's kind of the going rate for these like top non-quarterback players. So if that move was available for the Bears, I absolutely would have made it, especially if it would have taken Micah Parsons away from the Packers. I absolutely would have made it. But I don't know, Steiner, do you think the Bears were even interested, or would you think they were in these discussions at all?
I don't think the Bears were interested, right? I don't think that Ryan Poles has big enough balls to make a move like this. And that's why I do think that they were out. Tom, I'm not going to rant on this for a while. Everyone's going to go back and say, like, hey, it was a mistake when Ryan Pace traded for Khalil Mack and there was uncertainty at the quarterback position. And a lot of people say, the Bears aren't ready to make this move. But my counterpoint is, like, you have so much money invested in a lot of players, right? You go after Joe Tooney, you go after Grady Jarrett. Like, those are win now type of players, right?
For sure.
You're paying them quite a bit of money. And then, and I get it. Hindsight, again, is always 2020. No one knew Micah Parsons was going to be available for 2 round 1 picks. But it's frustrating to me, Tom. You look at guys like, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, Tremaine Edmonds, Jonah Jackson, and Deo. And you see the cap figure invested into them this year and next is hovering right around $70 million. And I'm not talking cash. I'm talking cold, hard cap hits, right? That's a lot of money for guys who are mainly maybe average. I don't know, right? And I think my issue is, like, the standards are so low with the Bears. Like, as long as you're not awful, like, you get really hyped up, right? And $70 million for those guys who none of those are, game changers, Pro Bowl caliber, difference makers. And, in best case scenario, they're average, maybe slightly above average. So just the way the money is kind of allotted right now, Tom, I just don't really understand it. The Bears really haven't done anything, and it just seems like they're very complacent, right? I think they should have been in the trade negotiations with the Cowboys. So I think if the Bears offered their first round picks, maybe it would have looked a little bit more attractive to the Cowboys than the Packers, right? So I thought this would have been a good time to buy, especially post-draft. So it was really disappointing, Tom. And, I got really frustrated with it because it's like, man, have some balls, right? Like, make a needle-pushing move. Like, make that move. But I guess, like, just how it is, like, in the Bears brass and ownership, like, just be more responsible than the last guy. Be better at some area than the last GM, right? And you get an extension, right? That's why Ryan Pace got an extension. He was a way better drafter than Phil Emery. And I think why Ryan Poles gets an extension is because, he's more responsible with the cap, and he's better drafting early in the draft. And I give him credit for that. He has put the Bears in a better spot, but, have higher standards. Don't just build a statue for the guy just because he's better than the guy he replaced. And I'll leave it at that, Tom. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I could talk about this topic for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, we probably should have done like an entire podcast because we probably could do an entire episode on this trade. But Steiner, I love what you said, and I didn't even really think about like how you phrased of a bunch of the signings that they made were win now moves. So like you don't really have that excuse. Like if you like the whole argument that I'm hearing is like they're not 100% sold on Caleb. They don't want to make that investment. Okay, then why did you make these other investments that would basically tell your team and your direction that you are 100% sold on Caleb. Like, you did sign a bunch of older players. You did invest a lot of money into the defensive line. And that's kind of what I'll give the Packers credit for doing this entire time with the defensive line. Have they hit a ton of guys on their draft picks? No. But they've made a bunch of reps available for younger players. They didn't go out and sign like Grady Jarrett's and Deo's, middle of the road guys. Even Sweat, to some extent, I think kind of falls under that category where the guys that they drafted could hit and become, very early and are very premier players at their positions. And they're not invested financially in them if they don't. And they could go out and still have the capabilities of making a move like they just did. I very much like that strategy a whole lot better than swinging for the middle, which is what I think the Bears have done. The Bears have made some pretty home run swings in the mid round, not home run swings, but like they've taken the chances on, high end athletes, kind of like the Packers have on the defensive line, but they've also gone out and really swung for the middle money wise, which I think did make it harder to make this move. Which I don't think that would be the way I would have went about it. I do actually kind of admire how the Packers have attacked this defensive line. They took their swings. They didn't hit. I think that was frustrating, like guys like Van Ness not panning out. But then you have the capabilities to go out and make such a home run swing like they did with Parsons. But, Senator, why don't we end the conversation there and go over some more of the news that has got out of Hallis Hall in the past couple of days. So Braxton Jones was named the starting left tackle. Snyder, initial takeaways and thoughts about that?
Kind of expected it, right? You have a guy with 3 years experience there, probably has a better natural feel for the NFL talent than anyone else that was competing with him. But here's the thing, right? A lot of people say, well, the lease is going to be short, Ozzie, whoever it is. But Tom, at the end of the day, he's the best in the room of a, kind of an ugly competition right now, right? Like, you're kind of high on Trapilo, but you've seen he kind of struggled. They're putting him back at right. So it's like, I get it. Like, yes, the leash might be short with Braxton Jones, but I don't think you have an answer to, if he's struggling, are you going to bench him? It just looks like there's more risk if you do that, right? So I think, yet again, he gets handed the starting job. And I know that's kind of, I don't know, maybe that's like I don't know the way to say this, but maybe not the right way to put it. Because, again, it was an open competition. But in my eyes, I don't know. I don't think it was a strong competition in there because no one broke away. I don't think it was a real competition, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it was at first. And then with Ozzie struggling as much as he did, for him not looking as comfortable on the left side as he did, I think that they just kind of then they kind of subsided to this is just Braxton Jones's job now. And Braxton Jones has been up and down in the preseason. He's been an okay player throughout his career. So it's not like a huge vote of confidence that this is the direction they want to go. I think it was really just, like you said, kind of the best winner of a rough competition, which it can be tricky sometimes. But at the end of the day, I think that if he can gradually get back to his former self throughout the season, this was probably the best direction to go. Give Ozzie a year, let him develop, and hopefully he can take that job next year. And if he can't, then you have to invest in another position. Or maybe Braxton Jones could play well enough throughout the season and earn an extension. You have different angles now to attack this position for the future, but for the time being, it's okay. It still worries me a bit.
Yeah, again, like, we know who Braxton is. Like, again, you'll see a lot of Bears fans say, like, hey, guys, like, appreciate Braxton Jones. Like, it could be so much worse. He could be awful. And, like, the first thing that goes in my head, it's like, why do I need to why are the standards so low? Like, why do I need to celebrate just a guy not being awful, right? Being somewhat competent. And it's like the Braxton Jones argument. It's a Charles Leno argument all over again. It's like, hey, like, this is a super premium position that I am going to be criticizing with a magnifying glass. Like, we're going to be watching the film. Like, you're going to see him at times get bull rushed straight into the quarterback. Like, that's going to frustrate you, right? And you're going to see highs of him in the, run game. And you're going to see times where he actually holds it down against solid pass rushers or, the lower end tiers. And he, going to grade out fairly well. And, fans are like, oh, see, told you, Braxton. Like, but come on, though. It's like, hey, higher standards, right? I do think Ben Johnson, I do think the 12 personnel, I think it's going to help Braxton Jones. I think we're actually going to have a head coach finally, put his guys in situations where they're more prepared against the game plan, right? And you're going to get creative to help mask Braxton Jones. So I do think it's going to be better. And then Caleb has to get rid of the ball faster to help Braxton Jones as well. So again, I think it's going to be better for Braxton Jones in that area, but he still is who he is.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summation of how things will go this season. Some other injury notes are, I guess, guys that are back at practice. Kyle Monangai is back at practice. Roschon Johnson is not. The big one here, Snyder. Jalen Johnson practices for the first time of all the offseason. We're going to talk about his importance in this game, but Snyder, this is a really, really big sign for him to get back on track and be ready for Monday.
Huge, Tom. I mean, huge. I mean, we've seen in the preseason Deshaun Wright struggling. I mean, you even seen Tyreek Stevenson struggling. That was going to be an area of major weakness and a huge, huge panic button hit there, not having Jalen Johnson against the Vikings, going against Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson. That one, Tom, that one was really scaring me, but it looks like it's trending that Jalen Johnson will be back, and that's just a huge relief.
Yeah, I mean, I'll save it for our preview, but dude, just watching Deshaun Wright in the preseason get cooked by Tyquan Thornton, that could be a problem against the best receiver, first or second best receiver in the NFL if he had to play. So it worries me a little bit that this is a new defense for Jalen Johnson. And again, defense is not like offense in terms of like the timing and like the different things that you're asked to do. Like I think it's more universal, but still like this is a different style of defense. Jalen Johnson doesn't have a lot of reps in it. I think the way that Dennis Allen said earlier in the year that like Jalen Johnson will be following team's best receivers and you're going up against a very, very good one. So like that does worry me that this is his first like kind of action and maybe he'll have to knock some of the rust off. But even a rusty Jalen Johnson inspires more confidence than Deshaun Wright. So I'll leave that at that. The last bit of news, Snyder, the Bears work out Isaiah Foskey, the former second-round pick from the Saints. This kind of makes sense, right? A guy that got released after a very short stint in New Orleans with Dennis Allen, who kind of fits that Dennis Allen defensive end mold. I mean, I was semi-intrigued with him coming out of college. I had him more in the third round, but that was more so of a weak class. So kind of understood why he got pushed up the boards. I don't know, is there any major takeaways for you if the Bears do end up signing an Isaiah Foskey?
No, that was my boy. I wanted him in the second round, third round in that draft. I thought he really did fit the stature. I thought he was a stronger player, but yeah, no, it obviously didn't work out for him, Tom. But yeah, I mean, you might as well take a swing, especially with Austin Booker on IR for the first 4 games. I think it's good to have a body, maybe rotate him in a little bit or get him on the practice squad. I'd be intrigued with him, Tom. I would like that signing.
I don't think he'd be any worse than Deo, to be honest. So, he could legitimately, give decent snaps of what the Bears want Deo to be. I said coming out, my little synopsis was him was he's a power rusher through and through. That's how he wins. And, that's what Dennis Allen wants. So, I don't know why it didn't work out in New Orleans, but would I hate the move? No. But what am I expecting much? No. Other than that's kind of all we had to go over before we actually get into this preview. So, Snyder, why don't we get into this preview and start with the Bears offense against the Vikings defense? So the Vikings defense we've talked about since Brian Flores has been the defensive coordinator is one of the trickiest defenses to figure out. I mean, that's no secret. I think he's really grown a reputation over the past couple of years. So even when we were talking about this before, it's even grown even more and he's done even more crazier stuff. So that's definitely going to be where this game plan starts and ends for the Bears offense. But I will say, I am kind of fascinated on what the Vikings want to be moving forward. Are they going to continue to live and die on this sword of being super exotic? Because while I do think it can give younger quarterbacks and struggling quarterbacks problems, I think that they've run into their issues in the playoffs. And I think they knew that and made a lot of investments on the defensive line to kind of just win with 4 when they have to. And we saw that with them adding Jonathan Allen. We saw that with them adding Javon Hargrave. I think they wanted to get more pass rushers along the interior. to where if they didn't have to always rely on being this exotic defense. The problem is their secondary is still pretty rough. So I don't know if that's going to be the way they want to play all the time. And Snyder, I think specifically in this matchup, since it's Caleb Williams going into his second year, I don't think they're going to lean away from the exoticness that we know Brian Flores likes to do.
Oh, yeah. They are going to throw a lot at Caleb Williams to really get him flustered there, Tom. And it is scary, right? When you add a strong defensive line to a coordinator who is just super creative, right? Like his inside linebackers, Tom, weren't ever really household names, Tom. I think they still have Blake Cashman. I think it's Ivan Pace. Like guys who no one knew, but then the way he blitzes, those guys just, had like these, I don't say resurrections, but
I think Snyder had some difficulty, but yeah, or some technical difficulties with his connection. But yes, I am totally there with him that they've gotten a lot out of some role players in this defense. I think Brian Flores has done a great job of slotting guys in to where they play at their best. Josh Metellus is a name that really sticks out to me. This weird linebacker safety type that wouldn't work in most defenses. That I think that's like a better idea than an actual plan in place. He's had a great role in this defense. He's played really well. He's going to be relied upon even more in this defense because they got rid of Cam Bynum, who I thought was a really good player for them. So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that this is going to be a funky defense, especially in week 1, where the Vikings have had all of this time to game plan. And I'm sure they went back and watched. And this is a big talking point of the game that I wanted to talk about. They probably gone back and watched the Lions games and how much success the Lions had against them offensively and are going to try to capitalize and do things a little differently so they don't get beaten as badly. But I will say this, Snyder, the base plan around of what the Vikings want to do, they leave a lot of openings. They leave a lot of voids in their defense, but they want to trick the quarterback to the point where he'll hold the ball on too long enough that they'll be able to blitz him and sack him. That's what they want to do. They want to trick him. They want to make him hold on to the ball for that extra second and be able to get home with the quick pressures that they're scheming up. If the quarterback can figure it out, they leave themselves exposed a lot in the middle of the field specifically. Like I tweeted a bunch of clips out yesterday that kind of showed that Jared Goff figured them out for those 2 games. But the quarterbacks that can't, those are usually the ones that take a bunch of sacks and make a lot of bad decisions in this one. And I think that's going to be the same game plan that they're going to try to implement against the very young Caleb Williams.
Yeah, Tom, sorry, I kind of lost you there for a little bit, but again, I know you're kind of explaining how they had experience. Jared Goff kind of exploited it a little bit there, Tom, but I did kind of miss the first part of it. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries, and I think this can just kind of open up our bigger discussion. I from watching the Vikings defense last year, I think their big philosophy is while they are aggressive, they do play a lot of zone coverage. They're not like Dennis Allen aggressive where they're putting their corners on islands and leaving them exposed. Instead, we talked about this all off season long. And whenever we talked about the divisions and the roster building, when we did our roster ranking for the NFC North, the Vikings corner and secondaries is one of the worst in the NFL, in my opinion. Like, it is a very, very rough group. They're starting Jeff Okudah, who has been like benched in every stop he's ever been in. And that just kind of goes to show like the state of their secondary. So you're like intuitively you're thinking, okay, how can they be this aggressive? How can they bring so many extra rushers? Because really they do keep a lot of their defenders back. It's that second level of the defense that's where they leave themselves susceptible. They're not really putting those guys on islands. So they're kind of this interesting team that they are aggressive. They do blitz a lot, but they do blitz out of a lot of too high shells, which is an interesting kind of wrinkle to what you think an aggressive team will be, where they're leaving their corners isoed up and stuff like that. I think that's like the base philosophy of what they want to do. They're pretty safe on the back end in terms of like allowing explosive plays, but they are really aggressive with their front 7.
I got you, Tom. I know, yeah. That's how they'll it's kind of like I remember who was the linebacker from Miami, Tom, that was Jerome Baker.
Yes.
Yeah, super, super productive. But you're going to have to play quick. And I do think that's an advantage for the Bears when you add, more what you can do after the catch. If you're getting the quick releases with Adunze and what he could do. So I think the Bears could match up really well with this, Tom.
I do too. And I think like one of the most underrated parts about Ben Johnson and what they were able to do last year against the Vikings, beyond just the play calling and play designing and having good answers against the blitzes that Brian Flores threw at them, because they did. Like a lot of what Jared Goff was just replacing the blitzer, right? So the guys that are coming in the middle of the field were throwing right there when he leaves. And that worked really well for the Lions. But beyond that, everyone up front, their offensive linemen, their tight ends, their running backs, had a great idea of what to do in pass protection. They were able to buy Jared Goff just a little extra time for him to wait for that blitzer to clear and then really, really gash him. And do I expect the Bears to have that level of success in year one of week one of year one? Probably not. I think there's going to be more mistakes, which can be, definitely a huge strain on this offense. But I think a big part of this game plan, Snyder, is just everyone being on their P's and Q's and knowing what they're doing, especially from a protection standpoint. And I definitely think there's going to be more struggles, but if the Bears can make the right decisions more times than not, they'll have a good chance to win this game.
I love that breakdown, Tom. Again, I always said with the Matt Eberflus, maximum effort, but that doesn't mean maximum prepared, right? I feel like Ben Johnson is going to have a plan. The team is going to be prepared. And obviously, at the NFL, you're going to have maximum effort. But I say that, Tom. I mean, this is a coach who, again, had a plan, has a feel for Brian Flores and the Vikings, and it's going to be on the players to execute it, right? Again, I know this is a new offense. I get it, right? I think Ben Johnson threw just everything in the kitchen sink at the Bears in training camp. But now I think it's Vikings week. You have an extra day of practice. I think it's going to be condensed down. There's going to be areas of focus. And I think it's going to be a lot better for the Bears at the training camp, because now you have a focus, right? Now you have a game plan. And I think, again, Ben Johnson is a nutcase. He has the experience. And I think the Bears are going to come out a lot more prepared than maybe we have ever seen them.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping for, because this is the game where you really do need to be prepared. Brian Flores, his defense is the king of defenses that beat up on bad, undisciplined offenses. Like, that's really what it comes down to. That I think it's like the best measuring stick of how prepared your offense is, because of how much they throw at you and how kind of specific you need to be with your game plan. And Center, also beyond just kind of what they're doing from a pass game perspective, they were one of the better defenses, I think, last year at defending the run with, all the too high safety shells that they do, because they had a lot of stout run defenders up front. Like, they didn't really have like an interior penetrating style of front with their interior guys. Their edge rushers are obviously really good, and that can be a huge weakness for the Bears. Jonathan Grenard going up against Braxton Jones, but they really switched that this year. I talked about them adding Jonathan Allen. I talked about them adding Javon Hargrave. Neither of those guys have ever been great run defenders. I think that's even more so in this stage of their careers that they're not great run defenders. So, again, I'm interested to see like how this Bears run game goes. Are they going to be more of an outside zone team like they were with Detroit last year, or is this going to be more of a gap power thing or gap power scheme with Swift, who I think that's the strengths of his career? The Lions had a decent amount of success getting to the perimeter, and I think that's exactly what you want to do with DeAndre Swift. Jahmyr Gibbs had a lot of big runs against this team, and I think, do I expect DeAndre Swift to like gradually move the ball up the field if you want to continue to run him in between the tackles? I don't, but I do think the Bears could have an advantage in the interior offensive line in the run game, which is not something that we've been able to say for a while about this Bears offensive line, because this is a lighter group for Detroit or for Minnesota. And if they want to play the style that they want to play, where they are keeping a bunch of guys back in coverage, this is a very good way to exploit a lighter interior defensive line.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited, right? Ben Johnson is known for his, run game. And Tom, actually, am very high on Kyle Mungai. It took me a while, but I think he's going to have a role, right? I think in the preseason he looked like a strong ass runner. with vision. And I think he's going to have a role in between the tackles, short yardage. I think he's going to move the chains. I don't think it's going to be as bulky as DeAndre Swift in terms of usage, but I think he's going to have a very important role. I think he is going to be like convert those fourth downs, get you those goal line touches, but then you're going to have DeAndre Swift. I think he's going to get schemed up in the same way that Jahmyr Gibbs did in the passing game. Oh, Jahmyr Gibbs or anything, right? I think he's obviously a very poor man's version. But when you talk about putting DeAndre Swift in open space where he just has a clear running lane, and then, maybe he, has some very easy cuts. I think you've seen DeAndre Swift excel in that in his career, right? He's not the guy who's not going to run through you, right? He's going to run in between the tackles very strongly. But as a pass catcher and in open space, he is a special mover of the football, right? He makes his cuts. You've seen him over people. He's a special athlete. And I think you're going to see similar explosive plays like Jahmyr Gibbs. You're not going to get Jahmyr Gibbs in the running game, but I'm just talking about, Tom, when you get those open, easy lanes. I think Swift is really, really going to take advantage of that. And then you have that just power wrecking ball with Monangai. Tom, I think it's going to be a lot more productive than maybe a lot of people envision in this run game. I mean, it's a Ben Johnson offense. I really think it's going to be stronger than a lot of people say.
Yeah, I in this game specifically, I do think Swift really does match up well with the Vikings because we saw what Jahmyr Gibbs was like. I think really the difference maker for the Lions last year. Like his just ability to rip off long runs really gave the Vikings a lot of trouble. Dumping passes off to him in the perimeter again was a great check down outlet. Again, like I said, the Vikings defense is aggressive. But with their secondary, they're not aggressive. They play their corners off. So they leave their flats open a lot. And if that can be a quick outlet for Caleb Williams, I've had a lot of criticisms and quorums with Swift as an in-between the tackles runner. He is arguably the Bears' most dynamic player in space. So if that's the way they want to use him and it kind of aligns that way with where the Vikings defense can be weak, I think he can be a great plan and just a huge part of this game plan for the Bears offense to really, really exploit getting him in space, allowing those weaker secondary players to tackle him, I think could be an issue for the Vikings. So I'm just looking last year, Snyder, not DeAndre Swift, Jahmyr Gibbs against the Vikings last year had 38 attempts for 255 rushing yards. He averaged 6.7 yards per attempt. Do you know who the next closest player was in terms of yards per carry? The next closest player was Jordan Mason with 5 yards per attempt. So he had a whole 1.7 yards further. And again, DeAndre Swift is not Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is a lot better in between the tackles, but they're stylistically from a physical skill set standpoint, they're kind of the same players. And I could see Ben Johnson using them somewhat similarly to have some success on the ground against the Vikings. And then in the passing game too, Senator, and that leads me to my next point. This is a game I think DJ Moore really has to come to play, and I think will be a huge part of the game plan because, again, I don't want to keep harping on this, but the Vikings do run a lot of zone coverage, right? And if you just look at last year, how much success Jared Goff had on short passes, he was 37 of 43 attempts on short passes last year, 286 yards, averaged 6.7 yards per attempt. That was a completions percentage of 86%. He was second in EPA per drop back against the Vikings defense. Who on this Bears team do you want to get the ball on short passes very quickly? That's DJ Moore. That's who I want to get him schemed up the ball. I think he's going to be a huge part of this game plan. My fantasy guys definitely start DJ Moore this week because he's always had some decent success against the Vikings defense, and a huge reason why is how they want to play stylistically.
Yeah, when you say that, it also makes me want I want Luther Burden to get some action, right? Like obviously,
I don't know how much he's going to play, but I absolutely agree with you.
And that's the thing, right? We're gonna see, does Ben Johnson, does he see it the same way as you do? Where hey, these guys are playing off, they're playing in zone. Let's get it to the guys who are just nasty after the catch, and then your mind goes to one, DJ Moore, honestly, two, Luther Burden, and then DeAndre Swift, right? And again, I don't want to put down Rome Odunze. He has the ability. He's going to get hit. But, as excited as I am for Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet, As far as like after the catch, I know they're not really there. And again, I know they're going to have a huge role. I know what they could do. I know Loveland can do downfield, and I know he's a special athlete. I think Komet, he's going to be that forgotten guy, but he's also going to get some easy looks. I'm not saying don't use them, but I'm just saying you're playing off and you have those guys who are just nasty after the catch. It's DJ Moore, Luther Burden, and DeAndre Swift is the guys who you want to feed the ball and let them make magic happen after the catch.
I totally agree, because the Vikings defense, what they do is they're leaving a bunch of space in that next level of the defense. So who do you want to get the ball into their hands? It's the guys you just mentioned, Swift, Burden, DJ Moore. That's who is going to make the most of those opportunities. And there's nothing against Rome Odunze. He's also decent after the catch. It's just not the first player I'm thinking of manufacturing the ball in his hands. That said, if the Vikings ever do want to leave those guys one-on-one, if you got Jeff Okudah on Rome Odunze on the outside, like that is a matchup you exploit all day long. If they ever wanted to do that, and the times they do that, you have that in your bag. You have Colston Loveland one-on-one against anyone they really want to throw at him, to where I think that would be advantage in the Bears' favor. So it's really going to be on Caleb. I don't want to ever make it all about the quarterback, but it's really going to be on Caleb and the offensive game plan around figuring out this defense. From a skill set perspective, from a talent perspective, the Bears match up with the Vikings very, very well. It's just whether or not they can execute the higher level macro view of what the Vikings want to do defensively versus what the Bears want to do offensively. Senator, I don't know if there's anything else we should talk about with the offense. The last thing I guess I'll say about the defense is, for as aggressive as they are, they do drop back and play drop 8, which is they'll rush 3 and they'll drop 8 guys into coverage. They really kind of keep you on your toes that way. So again, just kind of another wrinkle to keep in mind when I think that's where the Lions were able to get after them in the run game, when they knew that, when the Vikings knew, the Lions are gashing us whenever we blitz, we're going to show blitz, drop into 8. The Lions will be like, okay, we're just going to keep running the ball then, and we're going to rip off explosive. So, it's just a good thing to kind of monitor the differences of bringing a 0 blitz versus dropping 8 and how available that is in the Vikings bag. But other than that, I think we kind of summarized what we're expecting to see from this Vikings defense.
Yeah, Tom, Again, this is a really great coaching staff for the Vikings, right? Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores. In years of past, this is just a crazy coaching mismatch, which is huge in the NFL, right? I'm so relieved to say it's like I don't feel that way, right? I think we will have answers. We're gonna be, I think, more prepared than we've seen in a very, very long time. I think everything that you're laying out, Tom, as far as philosophy, their defense, and everything, I finally feel confident that my head coach understands it the same way, right? And there's going to be a game plan. And again, I think they're going to come out. It might be, again, I think they're going to be prepared, Tom. My only concern is maybe like the chemistry, right? Maybe the feel for the offense, maybe the timing. I think that's what I'm more so worried about. Way less the game plan, right? So I think that is maybe the rust or the tweaks that I think that we might see, or the growing pains, as you would say. That's what worries me a little bit. But again, I think this coaching staff is going to have a plan, and I really, it's on the players to execute. We just got to see, how comfortable they really are, and we can't really see any IQ steps or anything like that. Got to be clean.
Totally agree. And it's just always a good disclaimer about, this is week 1, right? Like there could be a lot of new wrinkles. We are not, and it's really hard to preview. Like we can preview these games all we want, but it's very unpredictable with week 1 because all these teams have had so much time to implement new stuff, right? So it's not going to be copy and paste from last year. This is not going to be the Lions versus the Vikings because Ben Johnson's calling plays and Brian Flores is calling plays from an offensive versus defensive perspective. Like there's going to be new stuff from both sides. So that's always a good kind of disclaimer too. But yes, Snyder, totally agree with you. The Bears had some success against the Vikings last year. Like if you look at all the stats, Caleb Williams is right up there in like the top 7 for a lot of these stats, like short passes, intermediate passes. That first game against the Vikings, Caleb Williams did play really well. It was the second game. things didn't go so well. So I'm not as pessimistic as I was like against Justin Fields, where I was like, okay, this is really gonna make him struggle. I do have a better sense of Caleb Williams. The best things he does is throw in that short part of the field, and that's where the Lions gassed the Vikings last year. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting matchup. One I'm really excited to get into. So we have a Vikings fan in our midst. He says, Vikings fan here, Ben Johnson is the bane of my existence, and scheming against his offense has been Brian Flores' kryptonite. I think this should be a close game. I do as well, Snyder, wow. And I'm really curious, or I'm really intrigued to get to the next phase of this. How will the Vikings offense look under JJ McCarthy? I think that's been a huge thing that's not only been discussed in like the NFL world. You either there's two trains of thinking, Snyder, and I think me and you fall somewhere in the middle. You either think that JJ McCarthy sucks, he's a game manager, they're going to start to run the ball more and then just kind of find easy ways to get Justin Jefferson the ball, or you think that JJ McCarthy is going to come in and kind of pick up where Sam Darnold left, because Kevin O'Connell's been able to get success with any quarterback that he's really had. And I think me and you kind of lean more optimistically for the Vikings, that JJ McCarthy isn't that bad and they'll be still a successful offense. But I think it's worth noting that they've done a lot to improve their run game. How do you think that there's this new offense, I guess, under JJ McCarthy is going to look, Snyder?
Yes, where my mind goes is Sam Darnold just threw for 4,600 yards with the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell last year, and they had no issue just letting him walk. They didn't even try to tag and trade him. They just let him go. So knowing that, Tom, I mean, they have to feel really good about J.J. McCarthy and where he stands and how he can operate this offense. And to be honest, letting Sam Darnold walk, let them spend money on their defensive line and in other places. So it maybe, they become a better team. I think Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, they're just such a great duo to where, I remember.
Sorry, Snyder cut out again. Snyder, are you back? If not, I think I could kind of finish where he was going. He said he was basically saying how Justin Jefferson has been basically quarterback agnostic in terms of his production. And I think a huge reason of that is because of just the different things that Kevin O'Connell does to get him easy looks. That's been one of my favorite things about the Vikings offense. They make it so hard for you to game plan around Justin Jefferson and really double him up and show him extra protection or extra attention because of all the things they do with him from an alignment perspective, from a motion perspective. It's one of the best things I think the Rams have done, and everyone that's come from the Rams, as they get the ball into their best players very easily. And I think that's going to still be a very huge headache for the Bears. And this one, especially with maybe some injuries and not fully healthy secondary. I'm really curious to see, okay, I know that the Vikings did run the ball a lot last year, more than they have under the Kevin O'Connell era. It just didn't really work out. I'm curious to see, do they change that from a schematic perspective? Are they going to lean into more power runs? Because this has been a huge zone team, right? And Aaron Jones is more so a zone runner. They add Jordan Mason, who I think is more of a gap runner and more of a power runner. Is that going to be a bigger part of their game plan? Because I think that they could get after the Bears a little bit in that, if they do want to lean into more of the gap power stuff. I think that the battle of the trenches up front is going to be a huge determining factor on who wins this game in terms of the Vikings offense against the Bears defense, because I do think they made investments along that interior offensive line, and they're going to want to rely on them in a game that will be a hostile environment for JJ McCarthy. Snyder, I didn't want to cut you off because I do think that it's being overblown. Like, people are calling JJ McCarthy Alex Smith. I don't think that's a fair narrative. I think that he's always been kind of an aggressive passer, a more aggressive passer than people give him credit for. But I do think that they're going to want to run the ball in week one in a hostile environment against an experienced defensive coordinator that's going to show a lot of things to JJ McCarthy.
I guess where I worry, Tom, as far as like JJ McCarthy, I think maybe his box score might actually look better than what he plays, because I think Kevin O'Connell is so creative in motioning Justin Jefferson, right? Creating very easy looks with him. And you combine that with a guy who, again, is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. think he makes J.J. McCarthy job easier. It's kind of like how Matt LaFleur, right, where he had gadget guys as his top wide receivers in Christian Watson and Jaden Reed, but Jordan Love still throws for 4,000 plus yards because Matt LaFleur is so creative and makes it so easy for Jordan Love to be productive. I think I think Kevin O'Connell's the same way, but when you add that with T.J. Hockenson, Justin Jefferson, and some of their other weapons, and having a more efficient run game, which you expect, that I think it makes J.J. McCarthy's job easier. So I think maybe he's not going to be like that, best player on the field, like the top guy, but I think he's going to have an impressive stat line just because I think that KOC and Justin Jefferson just make it a little bit bulletproof for him to produce.
That's and Snyder, I think that's really what it comes down to. Will that game plan include more runs than we typically have seen from the Vikings, even though they ran the ball a decent amount last year? Will that include more runs? Will they kind of lean on that? Will they be better? Is basically what I'm waiting to see on how they get after this Bears defense. But I totally agree with you. Like the Vikings don't get enough credit for how easy they think they make on their quarterbacks, and I think that they've kind of entrenched all their quarterbacks in what they've always wanted to do philosophy-wise, which is play action, deep shots. Like that's kind of how they want to live and die. Even with them not having a great run game last year, they were one of the best play action teams in the NFL with Sam Darnold. And I think people are expecting like a different style of quarterback between Darnold and J.J. McCarthy, when really like that's who J.J. McCarthy was. Like he was an intermediate passer who was not afraid to rip it in like the scary parts of the field. That defenses have a lot of defenders at in the middle of the field. Like that's how J.J. McCarthy wanted to play. Yeah, was he, I guess, tamed a bit by the offense that he was in with, Jim Harbaugh? Sure, but that's every quarterback's kind of under those same circumstances with Jim Harbaugh. They want to run the ball. Like that's just what they want to do. So I don't really think that was a J.J. McCarthy thing. I think that was more of a Michigan thing. I think J.J. McCarthy is a very aggressive passer who's a lot more volatile than he's being treated from the narratives that I hear. Maybe I'm just wrong because I heard someone call him an Alex Smith. I'm like, did you watch J.J. McCarthy? He does not play like Alex Smith. Like he's aggressive and rips the ball.
Yeah, I'm not overlooking J.J. McCarthy at all. I like Q's question right here. So J.J. McCarthy, if you didn't know, is local. He did go to Nazareth Academy. I forget what town that it is. I know it's in like the Westmont, Willowbrook, Burr Ridge area, whatever it is. But he's very I think it's going to be well over 10 plus family and friends over for J.J. McCarthy. I'm sure he grew up a Bears fan. I'm sure all his family are Bears fans. So I think you're going to get a lot of family and friends. You're probably going to see that on the broadcast as well.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see the whole McCarthy clan queue. I would go definitely over. I'd say like the over-under should be set at like 17.5. Like I'm expecting that many people to be there in his camp. I mean, it just makes sense. But yeah, I mean, that is going to be an interesting element. This is a very interesting week one matchup. That's just another aspect of this game, that this is a homecoming for him. Snyder, he's actually from LaGrange, my hometown. Yeah, big pressure. Maybe that is more pressure, more eyes on him. But yeah, he's from LaGrange, so that will definitely be fascinating. Snyder, some other things to look out for in this game. Jalen Johnson, we already talked about it. His health, will he be at 100%? As long as he can play, and the Bears can. This is the luxury about the placement of when they're going to be playing the Vikings. Jordan Addison will be out in this one. They'll have T.J. Hockenson to obviously worry about, but really they'll have all of their attention, the availability of all of their attention to be placed on Justin Jefferson, which is what it always should be. Just figuring out different ways to bracket him, double cover him. That should be the center of this game plan defensively against the pass of the Vikings.
Yeah, Tom, again, this is a tough one. I mean, I know early on, like when the books lined up, I think the Bears were 2.5-point dogs, and now it's kind of closing in a little bit, like to where it's almost a pick. And right now, we're only 1.5-point dogs. So, and even Vegas, the people are speaking that it's going to be a closer game than maybe a lot of people initially felt. And I think it also just goes to like this is going to be what it is in the division, man. I think you just have a bloodbath a matchup in the division week in and week out.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those ones that you definitely think is going to come down to the wire. This is a hostile environment for JJ McCarthy. I was going to pull up some stats if I had them ready. But our guy, one of my favorite follows on Bears Twitter, I think his name is Ben Johnson Goat. He's one of my favorites. He tweeted out about just how much Dennis Allen's game plan changes defensively against the style of quarterback. So against veteran quarterbacks, he's very reluctant to blitz. He doesn't blitz as much. Against those younger quarterbacks, that blitz rate goes way up, right? Against rookie second-year quarterbacks. I'm expecting the Bears defense to be very aggressive in this one, Snyder. I think they're going to give a lot for J.J. McCarthy to look at. And again, kind of like what Brian Flores wants to do, make those quarterbacks second guess, make them hold on to the ball for a split second longer. And the thing with McCarthy is there were a couple like head-scratching, bone-scratching interceptions in college, but really where he gets himself into trouble, Snyder, he's kind of a one-speed thrower. Well, he'll just try to zip it in there, and he'll overshoot the receivers every now and then. And the Bears got him. I think there are going to be some opportunities in this game where that happens, and the Bears got to make the most of them. Where, Justin Jefferson's running over the middle of the field on a dig route, it goes right over his head into the safety's arms. The safety's got to come up with those plays because I think we'll see a couple of them in this matchup on Monday.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. And another thing, so like for anyone who wants to actually like I don't say criticize J.J. McCarthy, but like not buy into him, is that it's not like he had a red shirt last, right? Like he was injured the whole way through. And where you kind of learn like that timing, like those touch throws, is by the live reps, right? And he didn't really have any of that last year. Combine that with timing with his receivers, the chemistry there, that might be where a lot of Bears fans are right. So where it may not, it may not start off as smooth as the operation as it typically is, with the Vikings because of that. So yeah, anything that he gives us, we're gonna have to make the most of it.
Most definitely. I think there are going to be some opportunities where that happens. But Snyder, I think we can close out our preview here and talk about our final predictions in this game. Snyder, I think the Bears are going to come out with a W right now. You said the line was -1.5 Minnesota.
Yep.
Yeah, I would be taking the Bears there. That's basically a money line bet. I mean, it could really go either way. It's week 1. We don't know a whole lot. This is a new offense for the Bears. I just think that this is going to be a game where both teams try to do as much to take off the quarterback's plate as they can. And I think that Ben Johnson will be more equipped to do that against the Vikings because we've already seen him kind of have a history of doing that against against Brian Flores, having a good game plan. And I think the Bears are at fuller strength here. I think not having Jordan Addison is a huge loss for the Vikings in this matchup. The Bears can really focus their attentions on taking Justin Jefferson away. I think that's going to make things a lot trickier for the Vikings offense. And as long as the Bears can do a good job against their run game and that doesn't absolutely blow them away, I like the Bears' chances of winning this game in week 1.
And again, say what you want about the Bears' defensive line in terms of pass rush juice. They definitely brought in, beefy, strong run defender type of dude. And I think they have a high rotation of, interior pass rush as well. So I do think the Bears, I don't say they're going to shut down the run game. I know the Vikings made improvement there, but I think they're going to hold their own there to where, it's going to have to probably end up riding on the shoulders of J.J. McCarthy. Again, tons of pressure on him. Bears are at home. I think this is going to be a close one. Right? I think this is going to be a great matchup nonetheless, but I am totally rolling with the Bears, believing in Johnson. Tom, I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to be a little bit bold. I think the Bears put up, I'm going to give it, I say the Bears win 30-27 in a total.
Wow.
But they break the 30-point marker, and 30-27.
That's really bold. I'm not as bold as you. I'm not as bold as you. I will go. I think the Bears win this 17-13. I think it's going to be an ugly offensive game, to be honest. Like, I think we're going to see some head-scratching moments from both quarterbacks. And it's kind of what I'm expecting in this one. I think this is going to be a defensive showdown because it's so early into the season. I don't want to hit the panic button if that is the type of game plan where we do see this offense struggle. It's very early for both sides. I wouldn't make any definitive takeaways. I think these are going to be two teams where their offenses really ascend in the latter half of the year. So I expecting some hiccups. I say the Bears win 17-13 in this one.
That's funny. So you're saying smash the under at 43.5. I'm
Yeah.
Bears and the over. Take every over on receiving prop for both team passing guard props. Tom, I'm all in on this game. I don't know why I'm just expecting a shootout. It's just a hunch.
It's because you got so many Bears in fantasy, man. I think you're letting the fantasy lenses, just blind your judgment a bit. But yeah, I mean, hey, in terms of props, I'll end it here, Snyder. We can end it here. I would hammer DJ Moore's props. I think he's going to have a huge game. Or if the Bears win, if you think the Bears are going to win, I think that's going to be on the shoulders of a DJ Moore, of a Swift in the passing game. Our guy JJ, who's been commenting, is the Vikings fan. They don't have Gibbs running the ball. That's very true. I do worry about how the Bears' interior runs are going to go in this game because of Swift. And, there is a lot of new faces along the Bears' offensive line, but they did really upgrade that in the offseason. So we're hoping that gets better. But yeah, I really, really like DJ Moore in this game, Center. That would be my play. Is there anything else you want to add, though, before we get out of here?
DeAndre Swift over 14.5 receiving yards. I really like there. I think, again, you're going to get some easy looks there, some screen looks there. And, again, he has great hands for a running back. But, yeah, other than that, Tom, I couldn't be more fired up, Tom. I mean, this is that early season game. I'll be watching it at my uncle's in his newly built garage with some of the boys, some family. Tom, I am just fired up.
Most definitely. I am also fired up, and I'm very excited to get to this game and then obviously do our recap, Snyder. So if you guys liked our preview, we will be back hopefully on Tuesday morning, right, to recap this game. So I know JJ is more confident that the Vikings are going to win this one. He's saying the Bears left tackle could be an issue. It very well could be. But until we meet again, y'all, to talk about and recap this game, keep it real and bear down.
Bear down.